I'm Al Filreis, and this is PoemTalk at the Writer's House, where I have the pleasure of convening three friends in the world of poetry and poetics to collaborate on a close, but not too close, reading of some poems. We'll talk, maybe even disagree a bit, and perhaps open up the verse to a few new possibilities. And we hope gain for a poem that interests us some new readers and listeners. And I say listeners because PoemTalk poems are available in recordings made by the poets themselves as part of our Pen Sound Archive, writing.upenn.edu/pensound. Today, I'm joined here in Philadelphia at the Kelly Writers House in our Arts Café by Julia Bloch, poet, editor, critic, teacher, author of books of poems, including The Sacramento of Desire and Valley Fever, among others, editor of Jacket 2 magazine, whose current critical project is about innovative North American long poem, The Long Poem, looking at issues of gender ideology in the place of the lyric, and who I'm always, Julia, glad to say, is the director of the creative writing program here at the University of Pennsylvania, and by Maxe Crandall, poet, playwright, director, whose book about AIDS archives intergenerational memory, The Nancy Reagan Collective, has won tons of accolades and was finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in Transgender Poetry, who is the still interim, Max? Let's
Not
just call
anymore.
you associate director without interim status of the Feminist Gender and Sexuality Studies program at Stanford University, and whose project Before Back High Before is a dance theater adaptation of Anne Carson's Back High for ODC Theater in collaboration with Hope Moore Dance and trans puppeteer and classic scholar C. Michael Chin. And by Larissa Lai, who does not today get the prize for coming the greatest distance. I think Stanford is further away in miles, I want to say. Author of 8 books at last count, including most recently Iron Goddess of Mercy. And for those listening, only listening, you can't see me holding up, blocking my face, holding up this wonderful, wonderful book, a long poem inspired in part by the tumultuous history of Hong Kong. And Tiger Flu, also a Lambda Award-winning novel of 2019, who has been deeply involved for years in Canada and elsewhere with experimental poetry and speculative fiction communities since the late 1980s, not to age you, whose whole 80s, I said, who holds a Canada Research Chair at the University of Calgary on Treaty 7 territory, where she directs the Insurgent Architects House for creative writing. Larissa, does that awesome name for the house that you built, that you created, is that an invitation to the cool people and a warning to the not cool people? I mean, imagine entering voluntarily the Insurgent Architects House.
It transforms everyone who steps through its doors.
Do you have a one-sentence blurb about what that is?
About what the house is?
Yeah.
Sure. It's a house for creative writing, where we do a whole bunch of different kinds of events and podcasts.
Like Writer's House a little bit.
Yeah, not so one like Kelly Writers House, much smaller scale, focused on social justice and contemporary form.
Great. And it is, I should say, make it clear, in Calgary.
It's in Calgary. You have to come to Calgary.
You have to go to Calgary.
Yeah.
Great. Well, who is going to say why? I've been waiting for a year for this poem talk and this day. Who wants to, how did it come about, Julia Bloch? Do you remember?
We were in a Zoom room together almost 1 year ago
Yeah.
to talk about the great Sarah Dowling's book,
Right.
Entering
So we did a poem
Sappho.
talk.
We did a poem talk on Entering Sappho, and we decided to reconvene face-to-face a year from that date.
That's such a relatively neutral sounding description. I let me add editorially that we were so thrilled by the conversation we had together on Zoom. And I hope those who listen to the poem talk, I guess us among them, right? We all listened to it. And Sarah, too, was very pleased. It was so good that we thought, okay, damn the expense and damn the pandemic, which is not such a hard thing to do. Damn the pandemic. We calculated a year later, and here we are, and you made it on airplanes, and it's good. What do you think, Max? Is this a cool thing to have done?
Yes, I'm just so thrilled to be back here. You know, I lived in Philly for 2.5 years. And yeah, that poem talk we did on Sarah Dowling's book took me by surprise when we recorded that, because I had we were in lockdown and I had been sitting in front of my computer doing everything. And I felt like we made this space or this time where I fell down into deep conversation in a way that I hadn't for much time at that point. So it's so nice to be here in person.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but, this is episode 173 of PoemTalk, and they've all been great. Once in a while, the 4-person conversation, which sounds like it's hard to pull off, sounds like it's hard to do, just becomes so generative and creates something that's beyond any one. Like a good seminar, I suppose, except for, I just think it was so good, and I'm glad that you guys made the trip. I realize it's a long way. And let me just stipulate that later today, by the time this comes out, this thing that's going to happen in the near future, a reading featuring the 3 of you. I'm doing my tense pretty well.
A lot of tenses in that.
The near future, but when this comes out, it will be the recent past, and there will be a recording of a 3-person poetry reading that will have taken place in this room. Well, today, how did I do? Oh my gosh, I'm tired. I can't do poetry. We 4 have gathered here in person to talk about 2 prose poems in Harryette Mullen's collection, Sleeping with the Dictionary, a book I'm also holding up. For those of you watching the video, watch the video, not just listen to the audio. We all have one. It's a beautiful book.
It is beautiful. Published
By University of California Press, called Sleeping with the Dictionary in 2002. And the poems we'll talk about are Dim Lady and the title poem, Sleeping with the Dictionary. Our recording of Mullen's performance of these 2 pieces comes from episode 92 in the year 2005 of Leonard Schwartz's radio show, Cross-Cultural Poetics, in which Schwartz and Mullen, talking to each other over the phone between Evergreen, Oregon, I think, and Los Angeles, I imagine, devoted the whole poem to a discussion of and readings from Sleeping with the Dictionary. So here now, we will all listen to Harryette Mullen reading Dim Lady and Sleeping with the Dictionary.
Sleeping with the Dictionary. I beg to dicker with my silver-tongued companion, whose lips are ready to read my shining gloss. A versatile partner, conversant and well-versed in the verbal art, the dictionary is not averse to the solitary habits of the curiously wide-awake reader. In the dark night's insomnia, the book is a stimulating sedative, awakening my tired imagination to the hypnagogic trance of language. Retiring to the canopy of the bedroom, turning on the bedside light, taking the big dictionary to bed, clutching the unabridged bulk heavy with the weight of all the meanings between these covers, smoothing the thin sheets thick with accented syllables, all are exercises in the conscious regimen of dreamers who toss words on their tongues while turning illuminated pages. To go through all these motions and procedures, groping in the dark for an alluring word, is the poet's nocturnal mission. Aroused by myriad possibilities, we try out the most perverse positions in the practice of our nightly act, the penetration of the denotative body of the work. Any exit from the logic of language might be an entry in a symptomatic dictionary. The alphabetical order of this ample block of knowledge might render a dense lexicon of lucid hallucinations. Beside the bed, a pad lies open to record the meandering of migratory words. In the rapid eye movement of the poet's night vision, this dictum can be decoded like the secret acrostic of a lover's name.
You've been listening to Harryette Mullen reading Sleeping with a Dictionary from the book by that same title. Could I ask you to read one more piece from the book? I was thinking of Dim Lady.
Great.
Yeah.
Dim Lady. My honey bunches peepers are nothing like neon. Today's special at Red Lobster is redder than her kisser. If liquid paper is white, her racks are institutional beige. If her mop were slinkies, dishwater slinkies would grow on her noggin. I have seen tablecloths in Shakey's pizza parlors, red and white, but no such picnic colors do I see in her mug. and in some minty fresh mouthwashes there is more sweetness than in the garlic breeze my main squeeze wheezes. I love to hear her rap, yet I'm aware that Muzak has a hipper beat. I don't know any Marilyn Monroes. My ball and chain is plain from head to toe, and yet, by gosh, my scrumptious Twinkie has as much sex appeal for me as any lanky model or platinum movie idol who's hyped beyond belief.
So you heard the voice of Harryette Mullen reading over the phone, and I was wrong in suggesting that on Leonard Schwartz's side he was in Oregon. He's in fact at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Larissa, you came... Oh, no, it was Max who came the furthest, so you get to decide which one we should talk about first.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I think we have to go with Sleeping with the Dictionary.
Okay, great. It is the title poem, and it also kind of sets out themes. So why don't we do a lightning round and have all four of us just toss out onto the table in a phrase or a word some of the themes that are happening here. Max, you start.
For me, this is such a luscious poem. In the joining, the hybridizing, the simultaneity of the languages of sex and sleep and silent thought.
Cool. Sex, sleep, silent thought. Larissa, toss out another topic that gets raised by this, please.
Well, I too, like Max, am sort of intrigued by all of the sexual language, that sense of intimacy with the dictionary at work in the poem. But as I began to think about it, I find myself also really interested in the larger metaphor of poetry as an act of cross-fertilization or something, a collaboration, an intimate collaboration with the firmed-up lexicon of the dictionary, where the other partner, presumably female, is not so much attached to the lexicon, the tightness of the lexicon, but in a space of opening up. So there's gender stuff happening in here that's really curious and power related.
Great. Well, we'll totally get back to that. Julia, do you want to toss out, is there something different and additive?
Yeah, I feel like reading this again, I noticed that there's almost like a dictionary within the dictionary. So Larissa's saying there's something meta-poetic going on here, and I feel like there's something meta-dictionary going on here. There's a lexicon within the lexicon, and there's a stimulating sedative. There are all these interesting contradictions. The idea that a dictionary is about rules and following those rules, but here the dictionary is about this weird transitional space between waking and sleep. So it's a different kind of dictionary within the dictionary.
So I won't add a new one. I'll just join a couple of them by saying that the creative play, shall we call it, of positions in bed gets amplified and made even more generative by the fact that the sexual partner, either analogously or literally, is a dictionary. So migratory words are only, the meandering of migratory words is only made possible by this amazing analogy. Anyway, okay, so Max, back to you. Go anywhere with this. It's a, can we say, we can say clever, but can we also say fun? Is that the wrong word? When you realize how marvelous this analogy, this comparison is being made? Is that wrong?
No, it's fun because it's love. It's a love poem for me. And I'm excited to dig into both of these reads, Larissa and Julia's reads. Part of me I think the meta-ness of this poem is a lure for poets who love language, so that the intimacy that's being discussed here is in a way just a tactile description of what it's like to live with language, what it's like to live in love with language on a daily basis, and to hold that in the body. Mm-hmm.
And nightly too.
Yes.
To go to bed. I mean, Julia, don't we begin in a sort of sophomoric way with this book? And by the way, sophomores literally, I mean, this is assigned to classroom. I imagine this is well adapted and adopted in classes. So I'm thinking of like someone new to something like this would say, oh my God, she's playing with the idea of actually going to bed with the dictionary. Can you go a little ways into that?
Yeah, it's literally about sleeping and intercourse with the dictionary. So it's this beautiful conflation of this the state of consciousness, this hypnagogic trance of language, and how language is very seductive and can literally change one's consciousness in much the way that good sex can change your consciousness, can have you experience everything differently. And it's both denotative in the way that the dictionary is, denotative body of the work. And then there's this other generating of language happening. There's a pad lying open to record the meandering of migratory words. So it's unmoored at the same time that it's beautifully like sourced in this book.
Larissa, go from there. What do we do with there's a sexual lexicon that gets drawn out of the dictionary. Tongues, groping, arouse, perverse positions, body. And of course, it begins with, I beg to dicker with my silver-tongued companion. There's a tongue.
Mm-hmm.
What's she doing?
I'm really interested in what Julia is saying about how in sex, if it's good sex, it can transform you when you enter into another space. I think that's really cool. I also think there's actually something procreative happening here. It's kind of heterosexual. It's pretty straight in a way, but with between the dickering and the silver tongue and the shining gloss. The shining gloss actually is interesting because dictionaries do also gloss, but she's glossing in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
From the way
There's
that
also the glossiness of an aroused body. There's all sorts of gloss happening.
Or it could be lip gloss.
Lip gloss.
But what also, it's sort of hovering though. There's no actual child that comes out of the poem, and yet the poem, in a sense, is kind of a child.
Well, there's a nocturnal mission, which
there's
is
a nocturnal
emission, which is not necessarily procreative in the sense of creating another human, but
there are myriad possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are myriad possibilities, the proliferating of possible progeny that emerge from these perverse positions, right? By mixing things up in ways that you're not supposed to, which is exactly what poets do.
Yeah, that's the definition of perversity, and perversity is a word that appears in the poem.
Is alphabetical order, which in so much avant-garde writing is a bad thing. Let's get out of that, right? I've been working with Caroline Bergvall's work, and she will often talk about alphabeticism as a limitation. But in this case, I think the speaker is in love with alphabetical order, thinks it's great. What's the value of that? Is it ironic? The alphabetical order of this ample block of knowledge might render a dense lexicon of lucid hallucinations.
Well, I think without the restraint of the alphabet and its order, the dictionary and its order, it's harder to be creative if you're not perversely pushing against something, right? Then how do you know what to make? How do you know what's perverse if there isn't something there that's already in order?
Or the perversity is messing with the order, using the order not in the way it was intended, using the dictionary in ways that were not originally intended.
That's what I mean.
You're not supposed to just sleep with a dictionary. You're supposed to put it on a desk or a bookshelf.
That's right.
You're not supposed to take it to bed.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Wait, what do you mean you're not supposed to? Is that a rule from your upbringing or something?
It's a rule that I just verbalized for the first time in this moment. But yeah, dictionary is not appropriate bedtime pleasurable reading, but it is for poets, of course. You know, we love vocabulary books and
taking the dictionary to bed. I mean, generally we don't. In the age of tablets, I guess it's so easy not to do this, but generally, Max, we're not supposed to take a big giant book to bed because you'll be asleep in 5 minutes and you could hurt yourself. Right?
But it's such a great text for a dreamscape. And I think I read that Harryette Mullen, loves the dictionary, but also loves dictionaries of slang and kind of has collections of different. And I, as a writer, love those too. Do we all? Maybe.
I think we all
But
do.
there's like that presentation of alphabetical order. And then, of course, it's so easily disrupted because you can flip to any page. And there's a blankness in the dictionary where, of course, the meanings look stable when you read the dictionary, but of course we know they're not. And that's what Mullen's a master of, is clashing these contexts together in order to produce. I don't know what she produces. To me, I wouldn't say she produces a new language. That's too simple, but it's a new form.
Yeah, or maybe reading, a new form of reading. Because, as you say, she's a master of allusion and puns and neologisms, but always coming back to this like source text, which she shows us makes all those things possible. Like it was there all along in a way, if you just read it.
And the source text, like the Beloved, could be anything. It's really the act and the performing, the negotiations, which I want to hear you talk about power more.
The other thing that's striking me as you're speaking, Max, and sort of thinking about alphabetical order is, even though the words in the dictionary are placed in alphabetical order, once you get into the dictionary definitions of things, it shows you the instability of language.
Yeah.
The layers of meaning in any single word, the range of possible meanings, the usages, the misusages, the historical terms. It does tell you all those things. And so there's a way in which it kind of shows you how you can play with it also. So the possibility is already there. Speaking of power, that there's that kind of feminine, insofar as we're sort of thinking in terms of Western metaphysics, that feminine possibility for the slipping away, for the turn, for the instability of language is already there, embedded in the dictionary.
You can't help it.
Can't help it.
Let's riff more on power.
Won't stop.
This is a power couple in some ways, because there is a kind of difference between the two. One is a person who can write a poem and gets into bed and turns the light off and so forth, and the other is a book. But they're mutual. It's a good relationship. Does the language and the tone and the punning affirm what I just said, that it's a good relationship? It seems like a relationship of mutuality that's successful.
Well, it begins with this huge joke. I beg to dicker with my silver-tongued companion. So it's a pun, I guess, on I beg to differ. But dicker means engage in petty argument, and the poem is nothing there's nothing petty about the poem. So we're really being toyed with just in that opening phrase. And it stops me up in this really exciting way. And then we get whose lips are ready to read my shining gloss. We talked earlier about all those meanings of gloss that get raised. So there's a power couple here. It's a relation of mutuality, but intense playfulness.
It may be that because we're going to talk about Dim Lady also, I'm affected by that in thinking of this whole collection as partly in conversation with the long love poem tradition, in which typically a male poet is talking about wanting physical sex, but pretending to want someone who's good at speaking and using language. I'd like to have a really good conversation with you. Not really. In that tradition...
I read it for the stories. I read Playboy for the stories.
Right. I read Playboy for the stories. Thank you. So there is an arousal here. This is a defiant. In that tradition, this is defiant, saying, I have a partner who's very versatile and who is good at perverse positions in this nightly act. This is good sex. And it's really derived from that silver-tongued conversation that we can have. That's what arouses me. Yeah? Did I say something really obvious? You guys are looking at me like, yeah, Al, okay.
No, it's just the masks. It's just the masks.
But there's also a solitude in this poem, I think, where it's about sex and it's about sex, but it's also about this nightly ritual where we turn on the sheets and what did you say?
Self-love. It could be about,
Yes. But also just a non-eroticized ritual of getting into bed and the thoughts that run through your head and where do they come from? How is sleep? We're heading toward this thing of sleep where language might still exist, but where we might have less control, where meaning might become where meanings will change.
Mm.
Or we fall into our own unconscious.
Yes.
We fall asleep, we fall literally unconscious. And then the relationship with language, we have less control of it, but it's still us. It's just not our sort of active, willful, agented, thinking, poetry writing self. But that's where poetry gets written too. I mean, that's part of the joy of poetry is, discovering the possibility of those layers of meaning that can kind of rupture up, even as one is not necessarily intending the fullness of the rupture when one is writing. So that's also sex and sleep.
Is there this poem is produced from this activity? Is there any sign in the writing of this prose poem itself that a poem is being written as a result of this sleepy time engagement with the dictionary?
Like
You're all looking at me. You better
Well,
look
there's
at
a
text.
there's a pad lying
Yes.
open to record the meandering of migratory
We have another
words.
text.
Migratory words being a pun on migratory birds. There's
But also the migration from the dictionary to this poem.
to this
probably
poem.
this one.
And so if I think about a pad lying open next to my bed, that's because I'm reaching over to scribble, maybe half asleep, maybe the light's not on. I'm writing semi-consciously through some kind of dream state. We were probably all advised at some point in our lives to keep a journal by the bed for those ideas that bubble up in the half-awake states. And then when we get to, what do people think about this dictum? What is the dictum what's being written on the pad? This dictum can be decoded.
Secret acrostic of a lover's name. She just can't resist the dick and dictum.
You think that's it?
It's like loosen up.
it's
Here
only
we go.
part of it, though.
But Larissa, this is pretty strong there. This dictum, which one? That's basically what Julia's asking. Like, which dictum is it?
In the rapid eye movement of the poet's night vision, so the poet's eyes closed, they're seeing, they're dreaming. And in the dream, the dictionary's dictum can be decoded. Like there's something in the dictionary beyond the dictionary. The secret acrostic of a lover's name, right? That if the dictionary could be decoded or reordered.
And when you write a secret acrostic, it's because you are trying to seduce someone. You're writing a love poem that doesn't announce itself immediately as a love poem.
That's right.
But then your beloved realizes, oh, this is for me.
It kind of makes you go back and try to find where the acrostic is, but you can't. I haven't. Is there some code of the name of this dictionary in here?
Yeah, exactly.
I have one more question about this, then we should switch to Dim Lady, and we can come back. What kind of title poem is this? What kind of productive relationship does this poem have? Is it first in the book?
No.
It's not, but it is. It really feels titular.
Yeah.
So,
and it has to appear here because it begins with an S, and all of the poems are alphabetized by title.
Good. So it's a preface that's buried alphabetically. But my question is, does this feel like the kind of poem, like we chose 2 poems instead of 3 or 4 or 1, and we had to choose this one as well as another because, Max, in what way does it serve as a statement of the poetics of this particular project?
Yeah, we have to do this one. It's the title track. It's an Ars Poetica.
It is, really.
I think so, yeah.
If it is, what are the dicta of that Ars Poetica? What are some of the rules?
Loosen up.
Listen up, right?
Loosen up. To read me, loosen up. And also when you, as a writer, loosen up with language.
Okay, let's promulgate some more
Have
dicta.
fun.
Have fun. Get aroused by language. It can make you...
break rules.
What
and
rules are broken?
Play with alphabetic rules and denotative rules.
Mm-hmm.
And throw your body into it. Or throw your body into it.
Yeah, the body's there.
Yeah,
Throw your body
so
into this
present.
tumble of meanings.
Yeah.
And keep a notebook.
Keep a note. Right, every day.
Let's go to Dim Lady. So there is a source text. We all figured that out separately. Larissa, what's the source text?
Oh, it's Shakespeare's Sonnet 130, My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun.
Do you mind reading it? When's the last time you read this sonnet aloud?
I don't know.
Grade school?
Probably, if. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes there is more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare.
So let's play a game, and each of us will pick a sentence or a line from the Shakespeare and then compare it with what Harryette Mullen does to it. And that'll put into the record the sort of density of the way she's applying a process. Starting with Julia Bloch. You want to pick one?
Yeah, I'll just start with the first line. So my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun.
A classic, a famous line, because I believe it's purely iambic, is it? My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Pretty iambic.
Yeah, and it's often misread, and people don't often realize until they get really into it that the Shakespeare's poem is saying something about beauty that you might not expect. So then we get Harriette's line, my honey bunches peepers are nothing like neon. Again, strictly iambic. Is neon like the sun? Well, kind of, but I guess not as quote-unquote good. We think of neon as kind of harsh and glaring and cheesy and cheap. And also honey bunches peepers is idiomatic slang and affectionate, but kind of, it's definitely a different kind of vocabulary than
It's
my
both
mistress's.
modern and archaic, peepers.
Peepers, yeah.
Hey, jeepers, creepers, yeah. Where'd you get those peepers from, like, maybe the 1920s?
So in both lines, the eyes do not sound super appealing, but Harriette just turns up the volume.
Do you want to guess, before we turn to Max for his sentence, do you want to guess what the source of, is she just substituting for fun? Is she using some kind of method? Maybe a dictionary of slang?
Yeah, so in terms of method, it feels a little bit like something like N+7, where you look up words in the dictionary and you count entries, and you can do a little fudging depending on what you find.
But it's not because it's synonymous.
But it's not, yeah.
Right.
So there's something else going on there. I don't know what the source text is, if it's an actual text or if it's like a world of vocabulary that's being taken from.
Okay. Let's go to Max and see if we can add more to this process.
Ooh, okay. I can't wait to talk about the mouthwash, but before we talk
You
about
can do the
mouthwash,
mouthwash one.
before we do that, we have to talk about Red Lobster, I think.
Okay, all right.
And so you want me to do a comparative read?
Yeah, would you?
And I'm just following Julia's first line. The second line is, coral is far more red than her lips red. So in Mullen's adaptation, even in that line, there's two reds being compared. There's comparative.
Right.
But then when Mullen comes in with this adaptation, what am I trying to say? Then the red becomes like literal, the brand, the brandedness of Red Lobster, and how almost the banal ideas of coral is far more red than her lips red. Coral is from the sea. So that gets Mullen to Red Lobster. Coral and the nouns in 130 are flat nouns, generic nouns. And Mullen turns them in some of these lines to, the line is, today's special at Red Lobster is redder than her kisser.
That's
and
so
the
brilliant.
noun becomes a brand. The flatness of the brand, or the corporation in this case,
Right.
Yeah.
which which is engineered from maybe the poetics
Yeah.
of the sea.
Unbelievable. Max, you came all the way across the country.
Done.
If you did only that, it would have been worth the
I'm gonna thank my parents, because when I would get a good report card, you
Red
know where they would
Lobster?
take me? To Red
Seriously?
Lobster.
Red Lobster.
sweet.
Oh my God! Let's not
Red
go there.
lobster.
But
Also, like,
But
are there
Max,
other kinds of lobsters?
if a student heard you riff so brilliantly in teaching this poem, let's say, and raised their hand and said, "Wait a minute, is she criticizing Shakespeare?" What would your answer be? I'm thinking the use of the commercial stuff.
No, I decided that I would read this as an adaptation, specifically, as taking up an original and adapting it into contemporary time.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know you were going to go there. Is there?
I don't know if I'm right, but
Okay.
I felt that if I wanted to label it, I would call it an adaptation.
Who wants to add?
I think sorry, Larissa.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead. You're responding.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is an adaptation. I think there also is a little bit of puncturing of Shakespeare going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at the Shakespeare, if hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head.
Which is a weird line.
So there's
isn't
a
it?
weird racist line in here,
Yes.
as though black wiry hair didn't stand up to the standards of beauty that are being parodied here. And so Harriette's doing two things: adapting the poem in a super playful way, but also having, I think, a critique of the Shakespeare.
And what
For me,
is
for-
Harriette's line? I'm sorry, Larissa. What is Harriette's line in response to that?
If her mop were slinkies, dishwater slinkies would grow on her noggin. Which makes no sense.
It's like those scrubby pads.
Yeah.
Well, slinkies are
Slinkies are those
they're wire.
toys.
They're wire.
Those toys made out of wire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
did you play with
dishwater.
slinkies too when you were good? Did they give you slinkies? No. Red Lobster and stuff. There was like a
I would have to go to
slinky
Friends House.
special.
We had slinkies when I was growing up. They're
Oh,
super
you guys
fun.
are aging
I
yourselves.
was going to say in relation to the problem of adaptation, I would agree with Max that it is, and I wonder if some of that is caught up in the title Dim Lady. I mean, Dim Lady is also, because her eyes are nothing like the sun or nothing like neon for Mullen. But this set of thoughts makes me wonder who the dim lady of the title is, whether it's the lover or the poet, who is not swift enough, but also is self-referentially kind of querying her own gesture, wondering why she doesn't throw Shakespeare further out the window.
Exactly. Who was the Dark Lady? I don't know. I'm not up on my Shakespeare. Who was the Dark Lady? Do we know?
I just know that.
I don't mean like the person, but
Yeah, I
what's
just know
the-
that 130 is part of the Dark Lady sonnets, but
Right.
I don't know who the Dark Lady
But
is.
what does dark mean?
But dark in the Shakespeare context means unlovely, means unappealing.
Right. So there's that sort of racist trope of darkness equals unbeautiful. And this is a poem, maybe one of the most famous poems in the love poem tradition of simile making. Right? So back to Max, you were very kind to Shakespeare. Can we be less kind?
Yes, I think I'll start out with a sort of minimal kindness, which is to say that, of course, a feminist reading of the poem is hey, look, the gap between the feminine ideal and women, or people who call themselves woman, is a violent gap. And in Sonnet 130, Shakespeare is pointing out, right, the kind of like emptiness of these poetic comparisons, right, that kind of are objectifying, for example, or are not about a person at all, but are really more about the speaker and about hierarchies of taste and beauty. But in that mechanism, the line is about, the feminine ideal is alabaster, is white. And so when you start getting language like done, or if, snow be white, then her breasts are done. Oh, that's where that comes from. And so, yeah, I definitely think...
D-U-N, what a weird word there.
Yeah. And then, of course, the mythologizing of the Dark Lady, right? And sort of I think when Mullet comes to this text, right, as a Black woman, then, and as a Black presumably speaker or writer, then then I think there's something pedagogical here that's saying, hey, this is not just about gender. This is also always already about race.
Mm-hmm.
I love to hear her rap, yet I'm aware that music has a hipper beat. Does anybody want to, following from what Max just said, does anybody want to read that line?
Can I say something, though, before we get to listening?
Sure.
Because I think part of the problem of the dimness is in order to make the critique, one has to still look at the woman, so it's still a scrutiny of the woman's body, right? Even if it's to make the recognition that her body is not ideal, I'm still like staring you down in order to say I love you, which is so twisted. But that's so interesting then to sort of think about. I love to hear her rap, yet I'm aware music has a hipper beat. Because Shakespeare does that too. He talks about her voice, right?
I love to hear her speak.
I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound.
There you go.
Uh-huh. So that's so interesting. Actually, yeah. There's the first stanza is about... First stanza in a bit is about sight, but then there's smell.
But there's distinction being made, sorry, Larissa, distinction being made in Shakespeare between speaking and music making. Mm-hmm. The rejoinder to that is a kind of speaking that is musical, rap, and a music that is awfully not musical, music.
Uh-huh.
And hipper is just a great word to throw in there because it really confuses the value.
It's super confusing. Mm-hmm. Like, music is anti-hip. Music is not hip at all. So I love the contradiction there because it confuses me in a pleasing way.
Well, Mullen is also really thinking about, contemporary 20th century consumption. Like with all of the brand names, Red Lobster, Liquid Paper, Shakey's Pizza Parlor. And then Muzak, of course, belongs to the elevator in any of these places. And the Twinkie, too. And
Minty Fresh mouthwash isn't technically a capitalizable product, but it is ad language. It's ad lingo.
Yeah.
So we add that to it.
Which in Shakespeare's moment, that sort of hypercapitalization is not really a thing yet. And so she's taking that up and sort of seeing how the things that he observed are extended even more deeply into the present moment with really not that much of a shift, except for that it requires, in terms of the logic, but it requires a language that ramps it, right? So we can see it for the present.
That makes sense to me, Larissa, especially in the last line and its tie back to advertising.
Yeah, like hyped beyond belief. There's an exasperation there, like, oh, I cannot believe how much this latest It Girl is being hyped.
So there's the lanky model or the platinum movie idol as opposed to
Which
the black...
comes down from Marilyn Monroe, the platinum movie idol.
But contrasts with the black wires of the head. So race comes in there again, like the platinum blonde Marilyn Monroe is whiter than white. The platinum is that white that's whiter than white.
Max, I invite you to say something that you wanted to say about 20 minutes ago about Minty Fresh mouthwashes. Was there something? You've been so good so far. Why don't you add something brilliant about that?
I'm going to read it. And in some Minty Fresh mouthwashes, there is more sweetness than the garlic breeze. My main squeeze wheezes. Like, come on. That's so good.
That's so good.
Minty Fresh, sweetness, garlic, and wheezing. I'm in awe of that line. That's all.
That's cool.
It's only some Minty Fresh mouthwashes. Do we feel like that's just an extra word there? Is it there for the sake of the meter? Because this is, even though it's a prose poem, it's still an iambic pentameter.
Julia Bloch, I have one more question on this, and then I think we're going to go around and get final thoughts. I'll start with you, but I think we all have something to say about this. So you are a poet and a critic, and oftentimes you get up in the morning, with a young child, you're probably not spending a lot of quiet time.
I get up every early morning.
Let's imagine someday that you're at your desk and you have a whole morning to write. And let's say you want to write, you're looking at me like,
Is it
can
going
you
to
make
happen?
this possible? Did I just win a fellowship without knowing it? And let's suppose the day's job is going to be, I have something to say about this Sonnet 130 Shakespeare. I really have something to say. And your choice is basically to write a critical piece that is fairly straightforward in its kind of close reading, and you want to write about race and gender in that. And then the other option is to write a poem like this. Now, I think what Harryette Mullen is doing is saying something that we all believe, sort of obvious, but maybe not everybody listening to this believes, which is that poetry can do more fabulously and more devastatingly, and certainly for a larger audience potentially, what a 25-page essay can do, although that can do it more straightforwardly and can be devastating in itself. But writing a poem response, I think we would all agree, is the most amazing thing you could do if you can pull it off. So I'm not asking you a stupid question like a binarism, like, would you rather write an essay? But I guess to speak to the critical value, this is a piece of criticism of Shakespeare. Yes?
Yeah, I think work like Harryette Mullen's shows us that you don't necessarily have to choose. I mean, you do maybe if you are thinking strictly about audience and publishing and platforms and stuff.
Well, PML is not going to publish an article that has Red Lobster and liquid paper and Slinkies in it.
Yeah, but poems like these, and it is written as a prose poem, and that's really important to me because it's written using the techniques of poetry, but it appears in lines and as a paragraph. And so that reminds me that you can do things with poetic prose. Yeah, I believe it is 14.
It's 12.
It's 12. Okay.
I really wanted it to be 14.
I think I've done exactly the same thing. Yeah, and by the way, she does this again later in the book with Variations on a Theme Park. She does this again with Sonnet 130 later in the poem, in the book rather. So that tells me not only can the poem do the critical work of expository essays or analysis or scholarship, but you get to do it over and over again. Like poems aren't in isolation. Poems are always in conversation with each other across the whole scope of a book.
And what specifically, Max, Larissa, on the question of race and gender in Shakespeare, does this poem do perhaps better than a more conventional piece of literary criticism? If I'm stipulating that it does, but you might not agree.
I think it comes back to that question of embodiment again. She's so kind of bodily present in her poetry and in the time. So I think all the slang does that. And whereas when you're writing criticism, the conceit of criticism is you're supposed to step out of it. I know we don't necessarily always these days, that in a more contemporary moment we do, or at least I do, and encourage my students to make themselves present in their criticism. But poetry just makes it, it's not that so much that it takes it for granted. I think it's really hard to write poetry without your body. And so you get Harryette Mullen, the fullness of her physical presence as a Black American woman in this poem, and you get the body of the lover less, there's more specificity to it, in spite of, it's weird because there's a kind of contradiction at work. She's using also a kind of generic language with all this corporate language. And yet somehow, I don't know, maybe Shakespeare's doing it too. Maybe it's about me being more contemporaneous with Mullen as opposed to Shakespeare. That sense of the lover's physical presence as well seems more specific in Dim Lady than in Shakespeare. I don't know, does it seem that way to you?
It does. And I guess my answer to that question, Al, is to say that this sonnet treats gender, race, and class, which we should have pointed out as well, in order to say in a way that I think is very condensed, very convincing, to show us what, or maybe to ask the question, what stabilizes languages of desire in terms of white supremacy, in terms of all of these structural apparati, and then what happens when we mess with them, or what happens when we take some of those stabilizing factors away. So her response, her adaptation, exposes Shakespeare's sonnet even as it's an attempt of undoing some of these structures, right? To still be embedded with destabilizing factors, that come through articulations of gender, race, and class.
You've all taught me something here about how to say, yet again, to friends, family, and students, why this kind of writing can be thought of as critical, and why critical writing can use some of these tools. Given what Larissa was saying particularly, why not write an article, Max, talking about that, I assume, class signifying Red Lobster happy day with the family, right? That is one way to begin an essay by Maxe Crandall on the Shakespeare, because that situates you. Or for this writer to say, I don't know any Marilyn Monroes. What a way to start a critical essay, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, it's time for us to offer final thoughts. This is for those of you who had long flights and thought many thoughts that haven't been expressed yet. To give a chance for you to add one. So, who wants to start? Max, I know you have lots more to say. What would you like? What one thing would you like to add? No, not. We're not ready for the.
We're doing the last round. Okay, we're doing the last round.
Final thoughts.
Okay, I know what I want to say. I was thinking about Muse and Drudges, Mullen's prior book, thinking about the poems we read today, and sort of just speculating about how the muse is something she's interested in, and as I was thinking, it made me interested in the muse as a construction and as a place of inspiration. And it made me think about the artist Mickalene Thomas's work, who's someone else I think of who works from muse. And specifically with Thomas, I think the muse is a queer space, is a space where we can work on intimacy, where for Thomas it's about working on aesthetics, but I think for Mullen it makes me want to keep thinking with Mullen about the muse.
Great, I'm glad you brought that up because we didn't talk specifically about the muse in our conversation too much. Julia Bloch, final thought.
I keep going back to the migratory words in Sleeping with the Dictionary and migratory birds, and I was Googling why do we have migratory birds? I mean, I know kind of generally, and I found out that they are driven not just by mental maps, but also by celestial ones, and that they aid in the movement of other species. And so it made me think about how these poems are driven by mental maps and possibly celestial maps as well. And I loved that element of mysticism. To be clear, the birds is my word. It's not Harryette Mullen's bird. I'm just assuming there's a pun here, but it's in there.
Yeah. Doesn't alphabetism in earlier centuries prior to the Enlightenment, particularly, or in cultures like, Eastern Hasidic Jewry, where mysticism is associated with alphabetism, and we think of alphabetism as a very ordered, rational thing, but actually it's very celestial, very mystical, very crazy.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's sort of, and the migratory birds are that mystical. Larissa Lai, final thought.
Oh my, pressure's on. I think what I would say about reading these two poems and thinking about them with the three of you is I really learned from Mullen a complex, loving, and interesting way of talking back to canon, which in this historical moment, the one in which we're having, where so many. Not just, I was going to say so many of the kids, but really so many of us, there's so much enraging going on around us. It's really hard to go back to Shakespeare or to go back to the dictionary with love and take up the engagement, take an engagement with those things in their specificity to continue to dream with them. And I think that's really important in this present moment. And she shows us how to do it in a really beautiful kind of way.
Thank you. My final thought is just autobiographical. I didn't sleep with the dictionary, but I slept with the World Book Encyclopedia, and I never got past C. A is a pretty big volume, B not so much for some reason, but C is a pretty big volume, and it's heavy, and I kept hitting my nose. I think one of the reasons my nose is so Schnazola-like is because I get hit by the C, the binder of the binding of the C. anyway, that experience was, as a young person, I had my own room, so I was alone. It was kind of scary. And the C, which I never got to D. The C taught me all kinds of C words and also became my buddy. And I'm sure that if anybody did a transcription of what I said that year, I think I was 5th grade or something, I would have used a lot of C words, a lot of words that began with the letter C. And this Sleeping with the Dictionary, in a funny way, brought me back to the enormous pleasure, self-made pleasure, of escaping into some weird alphabetism. Well, we like to end Poem Talk with a minute or two of Gathering Paradise, which is a chance for several of us, or all of us, if we're quick, to hail, commend someone or something going on in the poetry world or the art world, or any world, really. Who's ready? Julie, did you come prepared?
Yes.
You always do.
I did, in a sense. So, yeah, I was looking through Harryette Mullen's book of essays and interviews called The Cracks Between What We Are and What We Are Supposed to Be. And what I'm about to say just follows really nicely from what Larissa just said about canon. There's this line in this essay that Harryette Mullen has about Gertrude Stein. And she's writing about the problematic race politics of Gertrude Stein's work. And then she writes, I feel free to claim Gertrude as a literary foreparent, even though I am not so sure she would want to claim me as an error. And although I claim her as an ancestor, I cannot say that I am a devout ancestor worshiper. So I just really appreciate it whenever poets acknowledge the vexed nature of homage and indebtedness. And we see that certainly in all the work that we've been talking about today.
Perfect, and a really great way to end our conversation about the rejoinder to Shakespeare, which is complicated. Max, Gather Some Paradise?
Okay, I brought my copy of Sawako Nakayasu's Some Girls Walk Into the Country They Are From. This is out from Wave Books, 2020. And this book knocked my socks off. It's such an amazing performance-based, experimental work. Oh gosh, what can I say about it? That is about translation. It's about trying new forms for anything. And it's so big, it's so dense, and I love it.
And there's so many rewritings and writings through. Mm-hmm. Did your copy have that little index?
Yes. And
yes, so the index you read, and it tells you some of the sources. I mean, the one poem is a rewriting or a response to Bob Dylan's nuclear annihilation poem, or The Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. Another is a rewriting of a Robert Frost sonnet. Mm-hmm. There's some great stuff going on.
And I heard her on Zoom read this poem called Board Game that I hope everyone will go find. And it was so powerful and amazing. It was like nothing I've ever heard.
Fantastic. For Poem Talk listeners, 2 episodes from now will have been, there's my tense again, a recording of a Poem Talk episode, including Caroline Bergvall. And Caroline and I have co-curated that Poem Talk, and it's going to be about 4 or 5 poems from that book. Yay.
Teaser.
So stay tuned. Larissa Lai, Gather Some Paradise.
Oh, I think I'll do a little shout out for an interview that's coming up on the Tea House website soon of Karina Vernon talking about her book, The Black Prairie Archive. So it's this wonderful compendium that this Black Albertan scholar has just gathered of a long-standing Black poetic presence in Alberta, like for over the last couple of centuries. A pretty amazing book, and I'm looking forward to hearing the interview myself. It's been put together by a couple of my grad students, so
Cool.
I'll shout that out.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll look for that. My Gathering Paradise for me is Larissa Lai's Iron Goddess of Mercy, a poem. I'm holding it up for those who are not just... everybody's holding up their copies. Let it be known. I already had my copy, but Larissa just gave me an inscribed copy. And I wonder if I could cede over my Gathering Paradise time to ask you to read one of the sections, one of the Dear Freedom of Speech sections. This is 66 to 67.
Oh, sure.
Would you?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Now. Okay, so this is Fragment 23. Dear freedom of speech, you leech grinding undercover as democratic process, I saw you on the counter at Montana's wiping beef grease from your beard. Weird or feared, your fury's dreary, trolling beneath the bridge of birds webbing our digital sky. You swing the pubic of public opinion, spinning the rotten onion one fart at a time, lining your pockets with the proceeds of Wall Street greed, feeding at the trough of rough golf and grim bills passed by bullies in the gamers' chambers' disingenuous corridors of power. You were beautiful once, a bunch of daisies, a bed of poses, loaning your armor to all and sundry, as part of the parcel, colonialism stressed as democracy. I'm not too shy to wear that dress, battered and tattered, ill-fitting in the hip and crotch, and screaming gotcha, mad as a crow on the hatter's wire every time the wrong body steps out of line. It's fine. I bide my time, dreaming signs and pigeons passing on the truth of the park, stark as cop cars patrolling my neighbor's hood. Gratitude says, be good. We thought you'd be nice, expedient, obedient, take the blunt force of Maxwell's pilfered hammer, sold down the shiver or horse traded down by the tracks, or hackers anonymous and raised up only posthumously so some young guy can make a career, drink beer paid by your fear. Clarity, charity, the mock of democracy is that you're only meant to adore it, adore the white man's exploration. The habit of inhabitation is the straitjacket of race, and know your place. Face it, the encounter's only for the Chinaman if she wipes it down herself.
Wonderful, thank
Thanks
you.
for inviting that.
People are tempted to snap or something. That's Iron Goddess of Mercy, a poem by Larissa Lai. Well, that's all the scrumptious, sexy Twinkies we have time for on PoemTalk today. PoemTalk, you're supposed to laugh at that.
We did.
We're
How about
laughing on the
another?
inside.
Well, that's all the specials at Red Lobster we have time for on PoemTalk today. PoemTalk at the Writer's House is a collaboration of the Center for Programs in Contemporary Writing, CPCW, and the Kelly Writer's House at the University of Pennsylvania and the Poetry Foundation, poetryfoundation.org. Thanks so much to my guests, Julia Bloch, Maxe Crandall, and Larissa Lai. What a great reunion. Oh, my
So
gosh.
fun.
And let the record show that we are going to take a break and actually do 2 more videos that you can find in ModPo. So we're not done yet. And then there's that reading later, which will be in the past by the time you hear this. So make sure you tune in. Thanks so much, Julia, Max, Larissa, and to PoemTalk's director and engineer behind the audio and behind 2 cameras. Don't know how he does it by himself. There's 3 of him, I think. Zach Cardner, and to PoemTalk's editor, the same amazing Zach Cardner. And a shout out to Nathan and Elizabeth Light for their very generous support of PoemTalk. Next time on PoemTalk, I'll be talking 2 days from now, actually. I'll be talking with Timothy Yu, coming in from Wisconsin, and Joe Park, and Lindsay Warren, who's coming up from Delaware, about several poems from Divya Victor's new book, Curb. This is Al Filreis, and I hope you'll join us next month for that or another episode of PoemTalk.